Randall Riggs, thank you so much for jumping up with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, quick introduction on my side. I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft. We build custom software, oftentimes in the R&D type space. A lot in emerging tech, a lot in AI, and we interview as part of the series interesting guests in industries that we're passionate about. In this case, pharma. Randall Riggs, you want to take a couple minutes to give a quick introduction of who you are and which companies you work on and for?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. Randall Riggs. I started my career out at Eli Lilly and Company, carrying the bag, as they call it, selling Prozac and
Mm,
Gemzar and C-Chlor antibiotics and a bunch of other things. And so then I got my master's in finance, and they moved me up to Indianapolis to do mergers and acquisitions and corporate business development. Did that till '98, so for about 6 years, and then I had a big itch, if you will, to be entrepreneurial. And I remember a lot of my friends at Lilly would say, when they knew I was going to biotech, they'd say, "You're crazy. You should stay here because, big pharma, Lilly, and Lilly is a great company, but why are you leaving and doing that crazy stuff in biotech?" It was probably the best move, scary, but probably the best move I ever made, just because I was able to get trained by one of the best companies and everything from research, commercialization, clinical development, to acquisitions by a great company, and then apply that knowledge to different biotechs. So I went to started with companies like Lexicon Genetics, where I was one of the first employees. I was a senior VP of business development. We we were doing knockout technology of homologous recombination, where basically all the drugs that you use today, they most of the time they'll prevent a protein from expressing. And so basically what you want to do is knock out genetically targets and see when the mouse is born after it develops what happens minus that one target. So if a mouse has target X removed and it's real skinny, no matter how much fat of a diet you give it, then you go, wow, I should develop a drug to basically block that target, and I'll get the same physiological output, or should, because mice are 99% plus like us. They just have four legs, and we have two. So
mm.
you
A
usually
little smaller, also, I
they're
think.
smaller, but what I mean by they're closely related to us is that when you identify a human gene, there's a 99% chance you can find a homolog, a similar in the mouse. And so it's a great model to do drug discovery. But we did really great things on that, knocked out 500 targets that were druggable, and learned a lot about biology, and did that for like 7 years, and then moved on to other companies called BioCryst Pharmaceuticals, where I was their senior VP of business development. Did a lot of deals for them with like Roche and stuff. And then I got a call, not too long ago while I was at BioCryst, about 2 years into it, and company in Louisville, actually, it wasn't even a company, it was an idea, said, "Would you like to potentially become a CEO of a company where we take products out of the James Graham Brown Cancer Center," which is a miniature MD Anderson in Houston, but James Brown Cancer Center is the cancer center here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I put my hat in it because, again, as I mentioned to you before this recording, my dad passed away of multiple myeloma when he was 55 years old. I was 28, and I wanted to make an impact. I think most people in our industry are like that. You want to do more than just make money and have something meaningful. You want to just have an impact on the world after you're gone. And if you can get one or two drugs approved where you were part of that, man, that's pretty exciting. So far, I've
Yeah.
been in this 30 years, and I have only one drug. That should show you how hard this is, that's out there, that I was part of. And I would like to see more before I go to my next stage, pass away or whatever.
Meaning the other ones basically never made it to market.
Right. Yeah,
Mm,
because it's just so hard, because I mentioned earlier is like, everyone, I went here to Louisville to start a company called Advanced Cancer Therapeutics, taking products out of the Brown Cancer Center, moving it through phase one, and then looking to sell it to pharma because they do late stage development better than we do. as a small company, and we were successful in doing that. But cancer is always changing. You remember like the days when Michael Irving and all those guys, that is it Magic Johnson, not Michael Irving,
Magic
Magic
Johnson, yeah.
Johnson. He had AIDS, and today he's still living. He looks great. He's gonna probably live forever. But the AIDS virus does mutate, but it is not near as challenging as what cancer does. And a lot of people always say, "Well, you probably got cures to cancer. Pharma's just hiding it." Kind of like you heard in oil and gas, where they'd say, "We probably can go 600 miles a gallon," but the big oil companies are not allowing that technology to hit. I don't buy into any of that because I'm living it in the pharmaceutical area where, you're trying to develop a static drug that works theoretically against a known target in cancer, but cancer is like anything else, it wants to survive, so it mutates quickly. So when a drug is effective at 1 day or 1 year, it becomes resistant and it no longer is effective. And so that cancer, that patient progresses, and a lot of times there's nothing else left for them and they pass away. So, that's the challenge of the sad part about being involved in this is that you fail a lot. The good part is that you have to have a resilient skin to where even after getting knocked down time after time again, you got to stand back up and have a positive attitude and carry on. That's probably the biggest challenge, I think, because how many times do people like hearing no? I've heard that a lot of times. People say, I don't know if I can do this because if I hear no, it'll really hurt my feelings. If you don't if you don't understand how to take no and at least temporary defeat in pharmaceuticals, you should never be in this industry because you'll fail more than you will succeed.
I think that's true for most things. Um, obviously, a big part of my work is sales, right? So if you can't
Yes,
take no for an answer, I mean, that's tough. Um, I think the additional challenge with cancer is that not only is it always kind of evolving and moving, there's a lot of different types, right? And so even though you might figure out one, there's still thousands in other forms, right? Am I correct? And that just makes it,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. There's so many different mutations that occur. Like in lung cancer, there's thousands of mutations that occur. So again, trying to develop a drug, whether it be an antibody or a small molecule, again, that's a static process that is discovered, developed for that specific mutation of cancer. And when it mutates, then it becomes less effective to that. And then it keeps mutating and eventually it becomes really not effective. One of the things that's really important in our industry is immune therapy. Back in Cooley, back in the I think 70s, maybe even before that, he was real big on harnessing your own immune system to fight cancer, and that kind of was real hot. And then it died down in the kind of 80s and the 90s. It started back up again, and now it's real hot again. You see like companies like Merck with Keytruda, that's a PD-1 inhibitor that basically empowers your immune system to recognize the
Hmm.
the tumors and use your own T cells and stuff to go after them. 'Em. They've been successful, but did you realize that only about 50% of the time it works because of different challenges with immune therapy? So even with the advances that are done by brilliant scientists, cancer still seems to have the upper hand.
So does that work the same way a vaccine would work?
No, well, vaccine basically tells your body, what to expect in the antigen or the foreign object, and to basically neutralize it. And for PD-1, it's a checkpoint immune inhibitor, so it's kind of like a vaccine, but it does basically tell your immune system, hey, that thing that's circulating there, that's not a good guy. That is a bad
Mm.
guy. Go
If
kill
you
it.
see this guy, you know,
Yeah. And so,
react.
but then
Yeah.
cancer gets smart. For example, sometimes it'll spit out a bunch of lactic acid and which is a lot of sugar, and it basically gets acidic. And so then when the T cells try to come and fight that, it basically dissolves the T cell. That's its defense mechanism, the tumor's defense mechanism. So that's why one among many reasons why immune therapy is not the end all for basically curing cancer.
But it's a good component of a treatment potentially.
Absolutely, and we still depend a lot on, my grandfather. I hate to say this, but he died of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and I remember as a kid, him coming home from treatment, and he was a big man, but by the time he got treatment a couple times, he dwindled down to almost a stick, just nothing. And he had
Yeah.
bruises all over him, and he was just always throwing up. That's the chemotherapy you hear about, but we're still depending a lot on targeted chemotherapy to basically target and then basically unleash a bomb, if you will, on the tumors. The
Yeah.
problem with that is that
And then hope the tumor dies first, right? That's
yeah,
the
you're
yeah.
hoping the tumor dies first and the healthy cells can withstand the blast. But
Mhm.
so it works still, and it's still very much dependent on, but who knows what the future will hold. We have so many technologies now with siRNA and CART technology and a bunch of other stuff that's going on to help us, defeat cancer one day. To be honest with you, I'm not sure we'll ever defeat it. I think what would be a great win for us is if we have a day where you almost like treat cancer like hypertension. You take
Mhm.
a pill
An
and
ongoing thing, yeah.
yeah, keep it at bay, and you just live with it, and you live a good life.
Which effectively solves the problem.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most people would enjoy if they knew they had cancer and that they could live like I have hypertension. I take a Atenolol once a day and my blood pressure is perfect. And but if I didn't take it, I'd have high blood pressure. So cancer, if you could get to that stage where you just take a pill or an intravenous injection once a month and you keep your cancer at bay, that would be a great success without it progressing. The problem is, again, it over time, it starts to figure out ways to grow and
Yeah.
continue to take over the host.
Mhm. So what specific technologies are you working on at your companies at the moment?
Right now, we have a drug that basically inhibits topoisomerase, which is a known cancer target, overexpressed in a large part of cancers. So if it's overexpressed, that's what you want to suppress to hurt the cancer. But also, we have found that through different studies, our drug basically prevents the overexpression of c-Myc. c-Myc is the largest oncogene in the human genome that causes cancer. About 80% of all tumors or have overexpression of c-Myc. So we have a dual mechanism small molecule that inhibits a known validated cancer target topoisomerase, but also lowers the overexpression of c-Myc. And right now we're working with NIH. They're about to start a phase 2 trial on recurrent glioma. First time recurrent glioma patients. I'm very excited about this. We're going to have 40 patients, and the drug is used to treat the patients for once a day for 5 days. When we did that in PDX animals that had tumors of, when I say PDX, that's taking a human tissue cancer that's in the human brain and implanting it into a mouse and letting it grow and then treating it with our drug. That's called a PDX model. It's the closest thing we have to a human, what happened in that animal now that we might see in humans. So we
Mhm.
did that, and in 5 days of treatment alone, we saw the tumors disappear, which is phenomenal.
Wow.
And so we're hoping that we can see something similar, if not, almost similar in the humans. So that's why NIH is very excited, and that's what their mantra is, right? Is to take up the good fight for taxpayers because they get a lot of taxpayer money to do these things, and we're excited because they recognize our drug as being highly valuable potentially.
That's very cool. So disappear entirely. No traces of the tumor.
Yeah, it did and disappeared. Well, when we did the scan and stuff, there was no tumor involved. We could see no tumor. The reality of it is you always have micro tumors, or you sometimes, most of the time, have micro tumors floating around that. And that's why, you hear people sometimes will say, I'm in remission or I'm
Mhm.
cancer free, but then a year later they all of a sudden have
Yeah.
it again.
Yeah.
These micro tumors are hard to get out totally because of the embryonic stem cells in these kind of tumors. They tend to wait and then they grow back. Again, I don't profess to know all the biology behind cancer, but I just know there's way smarter people than me that have still not been able to find the cure for it. So it's a challenge.
What's the most promising tech, in cancer treatment, in your opinion? Maybe outside of your own technology, of course, but what do you see as the big, the next big step?
I think that there's 2 things right now. I don't know, well, there's 3 things. In addition to, again, I think the workhorse will always be targeted cytotoxic agents. When I mean targeted, going to the actual cancer and minimizing healthy cell exposure. That will still be the workhorse, I think.
So moving away from the chemo model, essentially.
Right. Then you have, I think that's being developed more and refined more now, is what we call antibody drug conjugates, which is where you basically link um, like a cytotoxic agent. You put it on, that's the payload, but you basically have an antibody that has a specific target where it's targeting an overexpressed oncogene or a target that it wants to go to, and it basically docks on that target, and then it releases the payload. So it's very specific to that cancer. That's going to minimize toxicities theoretically, although there have been toxicities with antibody drug conjugates. That's going to be more and more the future, and also immune therapy, as I mentioned, things like Keytruda and other things that come up that are able to unleash our T cells and B cells to fight the cancer in our own body. Which again, that's not without problems too, because once you start unleashing T cells, you can get what they call a cytokine release syndrome, which is where your body goes berserk and it doesn't know what to do. Your immune system wants to help you. So it starts throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the tumor, including so you got collateral damage. It starts killing your healthy cells too, tissues and
Right. Yeah.
so you can see how we say it's promising, but there, there's always liabilities. I wish there was just a silver bullet, but and maybe there will be one day. I fear that probably in my lifetime there won't be a silver bullet. Maybe in our kids' lifetime there will be.
Do you think we have a greater chance of solving this issue? And by solving, I mean, well, either first of all, like almost getting to the point where all cancers are manageable with maybe daily treatment, and treated more as a like a chronic disease. Do you think we have a higher chance of achieving that with AI and the evolution of AI?
I think it will help. I'm a little bit, and I'm probably one of the people that are less enthusiastic about AI solving the problem for biology. And the reason why I say that, and again, I'm a little bit jaded. You remember Blue Gene was IBM's exercise about being able to predict protein folding and how it was going to revolutionize drug discovery and development and all that. It never worked out. I think AI is gotten much more advanced than that and is going to be helpful, but I still think biology in a whole mammalian system is very complicated, so complicated that something like AI couldn't even figure out. Hey, if AI was that good, they should be able to figure out what to invest in, when to invest, and we should all be billionaires. That would be an easier task than doing solving the biology issue with human cancer, is being able to figure out what to invest, how to invest, and all that. So when people talk about AI being kind of the end all, I see it as a good tool, but to me, it's not the end all.
You mentioned, so I think what you described is kind of the AI capabilities now, right? Like what are they going to look like in a year, 2 years time? Um, Knowing that it's sort of exponential, right? So for me, I'm probably more optimistic on that front, but I think, also there's a ton of risks associated with AI becoming a little too powerful, but that's all other discussion. Um, what's the biggest challenge that you face at your company?
The biggest challenge is there's multiple, but the probably the biggest is getting sufficient funding for carrying operations because a lot of the pharma used to be we used to be able to partner a lot with them early um, and often. Now, a lot of times, pharma is saying, "Well, I'd like you to de-risk the program. You got a great idea, but I want it to go through what we call proof of concept, which is
Mhm.
phase two. So you're actually seeing not only safety but efficacy, good trends of efficacy with your drug. Well, that's about a 50, $60 million proposition from concept to getting to that stage. And so if you're a small entrepreneurial company, trying to get to that is really hard. And the other option is venture capital. And venture capital has become more to where they make their own kind of companies in house and then spin out companies.
Like a
And
venture studio type? Yeah.
yeah, and so if you're doing you're getting together your people that have got a lot of like, I've got 30 years experience. I'm working with people that have 40 years experience that have done really great things in farm and stuff. And we've come together to try to develop our, drugs and stuff. If we're not in Boston, or someplace like that, it's hard to get a VC in Boston to say, yes, we'll go ahead and take that risk, or we'll go and invest in you. So if I want it to, that's the big challenge. If you're in the Midwest or the South, getting access to that VC money in those relationships is very challenging.
I see. And is it a one or zero game where essentially, whoever's taking that bet essentially is either going to make a lot of money if the drug is ever hits the market, or just going to lose it all if it doesn't get there? Or is there like an in between?
There's an in between because it's like anything else. It matters what your exit model is. If your exit's to go from concept to commercialization, you've got about a 10% chance of making that, less really, but let's just call it 10%. But if you basically will go to, if you'll basically say, I'm going to go through proof of concept, then you've got a much better chance. And at that stage, at proof of concept, I'm going to hand it off to pharma and I'm going to get a large upfront fee, milestones, royalties.
Right.
As the product moves forward, you've mitigated a lot of the investors' risk because they're already getting back money. And it still may fail. In phase three, which is the last stage before you can get to commercialization, before you submit to the FDA for approval, there's still a 50% chance historically that you're going to fail. So imagine going through all that from concept, phase one, phase two, and then you finish phase three. You've probably spent well over 100 million, and you still only have like a 50% chance.
Yeah. Plus, I hear the whole process is sometimes 10 to 15 years, right? From essentially taking the
That's right.
research and yeah.
That's exactly right. So the odds are not in your favor, but again, if you're in this industry, that's what you signed up for.
Yeah. And I assume the rewards are worth it if there's still tons of investment. There must be, historically good returns.
There are the rewards are well worth it. I think one of the things that reminds me from the commercialization side, I'll never forget when I was selling Prozac for Lilly. You carried a bag and you had samples at that time in it, Prozac. And I remember going to one neurologist in the Texas Medical Center, and I was walking out, and a Hispanic family being in Texas, we had a lot of people from Mexico would come over and get treatment for in the U.S. Very wealthy Hispanic people. Um, they stopped me and this person pulled out a whole bunch of money and said, "Can I please buy the Prozac? I've been on this and it's changed my whole life and I feel so much better." And I was so elated to hear that because you sell these things, but you don't sometimes get to hear that personal experience. Now,
Yeah.
did I sell that to them? No, I couldn't, nor would I. That was illegal to do that. I told them that, and they
Yeah.
had to get a
And we
prescription and
have it
stuff,
on the
but it
record
was
here.
cool.
He did not do that.
Yeah. Lily trained us not to do that, and we would never do that, but it was nice to hear the confirmation that what you were promoting actually changed people's lives for the better,
Hmm.
and
Wow.
that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, that's good feedback for sure. What are you most annoyed about, from the pharma industry? Like what's something that's always been done one way that refuses to get modernized that just really annoys you or frustrates you?
I don't think anything frustrates me on the way things were, how it's been, because we are trying to make things go faster and stuff with even less animal studying to get into clinic. Um,
Get to humans faster?
Yes. The FDA's started to say that, they are gonna rely less on animals, more on complex in vitro, 3D models. So again, to get not only in faster, but because technology's evolved and has become better at predicting.
Sure.
We'll see how far that goes, but that's a nice thing. I think the only thing that really kind of frustrates me from the business side is more of anything is, it's harder to get the attention of people when you think you have something really good to get their attention, whether it be VC or pharma to help to their attention span, and it's not their fault because they have so much noise coming at them,
They get
is about that
bombarded.
of a
Yeah.
gnat. It's like if you can't see it in 3 seconds, capture their
Yeah.
attention, you're lost, and that's the
Sure.
challenge.
Sure. I mean, that's true, I think, for the world in general, right? Like, everyone's attention span is kind of cut down to the bare minimum. Even this, and the long form will have very little views, but the shorts, That's where people, get drawn to, and so the quick hits on YouTube, they're very popular. Just because again, like
Absolutely.
people can't really sit down for 30 minutes, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Um,
think about when you go to websites. If you go to a website and you can't figure it out in like 5 seconds what they're doing
yeah,
and
you
what
give
if it
up.
interests you, you're off
Yeah.
to the next
Move
website.
on to the next one. Yeah. That's right. Well, it's also because there's so many, right?
Yes.
There's
But
so
that's what I
many to
mean.
choose
There's so
from.
many messages, people vying for the limited resources of cash, whether it be from VCs or pharma that or investors that you really have to, it's gotten so hyper competitive. You really
Yeah.
have to nail it. And see,
Yeah.
like one of my other companies, just to point out, one of my other companies that I'm very excited about, we have a drug that's orally that has been through phase 2 and it was positioned the wrong way and it's safe. And it basically elevates a thing called inosine, which then elevates NAD plus, which is linked definitively to longevity of health, of overall health, meaning you have better, like your liver functions better, you have lower cholesterol, you're also able to lose weight. That oral drug could be worked in very nicely as an oral convenient in combination with the GLP shot injection and further enhance the patient value proposition. But pharma and some of that is so fixated on GLPs right now with the repressing appetite that's kind of controlling all their motion right now. And they're making billions off of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very trendy drug.
Yeah. I think with what this drug though is better is that also it showed that when you increase NAD plus, there was a recent article out by Case Western showing that it actually reversed Alzheimer's because your brain actually uses a lot of NAD plus and becomes depleted as you get older, and that accentuates the chances of Alzheimer's. So
Oh,
that's a
wow.
new discovery just recently. So I'm pretty excited about our oral drug and hoping that it's called Metashape is our company, but I had
Oh, yeah.
multiple
Okay.
companies like I was talking about, Metashape is with that one, and I have Gibson Oncology with the oncology. So people like me in entrepreneurial, we try to do a lot of different things because we want to try to make the biggest impact, and you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So you do a lot of
Sure.
things.
And also, you probably, you're interested in multiple things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the interesting thing is with this too, with this drug on Metashape is that you eat normally, as opposed to it like the current ones. I've heard a lot of people say when they take these GLPs, you lose weight, no doubt, but you don't eat anymore. You don't want to eat. And for a lot of people, I don't know about you, for me, I enjoy eating. I enjoy the sensations, the taste, and all that. Well, imagine if you can't really get that sensation anymore. You lose weight, but it's still that's a that's a kind of social event to eat and enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm lucky that, I have a fast metabolism where I could eat whatever I want. And it really never really shows that much. But it's not everybody is like that, unfortunately. And so yeah, I think essentially those drugs, my understanding is, like you said, like you essentially are kind of like they force you to eat less, which at the end of the day, if you eat less calories than you consume, right? It's the if you and you burn it rather, it's um that's how it works. Weight loss. And so you could
Yeah,
probably achieve that without drugs, but it's harder for some people. Yeah.
definitely. You're very fortunate you have a high metabolism. A lot of us have that high metabolism when you're young, but we lose it as we get older.
I've heard
But
that
you're
theory.
lucky.
Yeah.
You're
I'm 40, I'm still down, but who knows?
maybe we need to clone you or do some DNA sequencing and
Maybe, I could do research on me or something. Final question for you, Randall, today. What's your ship like with software of the company? Like what kind of software do you use? Which one is your favorite? And how does it help your operations?
so when you say software, I mean, the thing I'm gonna be is very as an entrepreneur, is really I use, the Microsoft suite of softwares.
Hmm.
I outsource accounting and things of that nature. So from PowerPoints to, an analysis, financial analysis, I'll use Excel and stuff like that, and PowerPoint for presentations, Word for documents. But in terms of, medical like graphs and stuff like that. Again, we outsource all that. So we get that. I don't know what they use on those, but they can do some really cool graphs and stuff. But it's pretty rudimentary for me in terms of software, what I
A
use.
lot of reporting software, kind of BI essentially.
Yes. You see a lot of software being used.
Well, in pharma, it's it's an interesting setup, right? Because so a lot of the startup companies that we talk to in biotech, um, small team, a lot of advisors, and obviously, kind of the focus is on drug development, right? So it's more on research, getting to clinical trials, getting to market, less so on perhaps like internal optimization or building custom software that would help them get to their destination. Just because it's not really the game. I feel that's the vibe I'm getting. Is it's not really it's more of an afterthought.
I agree with you, but now I will say because our clinical trial is about to start with the first time recurrent glioma patients, with the Gibbs Oncology. That one we will be doing customized software like a company called Medidata that's complex. You have to put so much data in these things and you can't
Sure.
just make data. You got to make graphs and all this other stuff. You got to make it easy for not only me, but if I want to talk to a pharma to show what this drug's doing visually. And so we use things like that. That's when software really becomes customized software becomes very important.
Basically, let management understand where things stand, and then essentially grow the company from data.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you basically again, when you're going to whether the FDA or whatever too, that software has to be pristine. It has to be capturing the data accurately. And so, when you're doing clinical trials, everything needs to be accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of get one shot, I assume. Yeah, very cool. Randall, thank you so much for your time today.
I thank you and take care and have a good rest of your day.